Welcome to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Connections, a podcast all about helping you comfortably connect with others in any situation. Hosted by Leanne and John, this podcast is proudly brought to you by Fortitude at Work. fortitudeatwork.com.au.
Welcome to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Connections. I'm Leanne.
Hi, I'm John.
Oh, you're still John, are you, Johnny?
I am.
That's good. Good on you. All right, so we've got an exciting episode today, don't we?
They're all exciting, every one of them.
They are all exciting. And perhaps before we even describe what the episode is about, just indulge me. Let me recount a little story, an awakening I've had, so to speak.
Good, go for it.
I've had quite a hectic week.
Yep.
We come in here on a Wednesday, don't we, usually? Perhaps I shouldn't give that away on a podcast. But we come here on a Wednesday and record our episodes. I have to say, over the last 5 days, I've had quite a hectic, tumultuous, that's a big word for me, tumultuous time up and down with a whole variety of things. And as I was coming out of our lift today, I was thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I've been over here and there's been lots of whirlwind chaos happening around me. I've been in this office over here and there's been chaotic episodes happening there. And I've been, out at other activities and there's been turmoil and upset and things happening there. And I thought, how unusual that wherever I've been, there's been this chaos this week. And then it dawned on me. What's the common factor amongst all of them?
That was my eyebrows going up. You didn't hear that? Yeah, go on.
What do you think was the common element?
Chaos?
I was the common element,
Oh,
wasn't
you,
I?
oh, right. So, okay. So you were in the middle of all of it and
Yeah.
you've worked out that you're the one.
That's very likely I was the chaos causer.
Really?
Well, I was thinking to myself, well, I am the common element here. And then I began to beat myself up.
Oh, right. So, you
So
thought-
wherever you go, you
Okay.
cause trouble.
Okay.
You must be the troublemaker, Leanne, is what I was thinking, which really wasn't terribly self-loving.
That was your head talk,
It was.
and you started to blame yourself or think that you're doing something wrong or there's something wrong with you.
Yes, a bit like that Peanuts character. What's his name? Linus, is he? He's always got that ball of dirt flying around him. I was beginning to feel like that. Wherever I went, I was taking my ball of chaos with me. So it wasn't a terribly self-loving thing. So I just thought I'd raise that little ditto because today we are talking about
Love.
self-love.
Okay. Good.
Yes. Stay with me, Johnny.
Okay. I'm catching up right now. I'm catching up now. It's self-love.
Self-love.
Okay.
So I've got a question for you as we start off. Tell me, John, what is self-love? Is it holding your own hand on the beach? Is it staring at yourself, your own reflection in the mirror for, 15, 20 minutes at a time?
Is it
Is
narcissistic?
it buying yourself chocolates?
Having tickets on yourself?
Having tickets on yourself,
Yeah,
correct?
an inflated sense of self or ego?
That's right. Is self-love anything like the romantic notion of everyday love that is presented to us in our lives? Is it, John?
Yes and no. I'm gonna sit on the fence until you've got your point across. Otherwise, I'm scared I'll get it wrong.
It's an open question. Feel free to answer me.
Oh, okay. Well, one thing I've noticed over the years with self-love or self-care is that it's been integral to my own mental health, and I've noticed when being present to people that are in pain or from fear or loss, the usual anecdote to that I've noticed almost always is that they find a self-loving, unconditional self-loving place for themselves, where they forgive themselves and they accept themselves for doing the best with what they knew in the moment, and that's the sort of thing that gives them a peace.
Okay, so if I was to open up the Webster Dictionary and look up self-love, I don't even know if it's listed as a term, but if I was, so in your definition, it would be being able to forgive yourself and
Accept yourself.
accept yourself.
Yeah. And to know that you are good enough
Ah,
and that you're doing your best at any given moment.
okay. To know that you're good enough and you're doing your best at any given moment.
Yeah. And in the process of self-care with self-love is to take the time and the energy that's needed to put yourself first, so that you can be available to others. But not giving to yourself first is giving to yourself first is very important.
Yeah. I think we've talked about that at a previous episode, haven't we?
Probably.
Yeah. He's shaking his head at me, everybody.
and then
or
saying-
you
and-
too that are listening.
And then saying yes.
I'm sure we did the airplane analogy about the whole, put your mask on first before you can tend to others. I think we have in another episode. But yes, so I agree. If I were to look it up in the Webster Dictionary, it would say, loving yourself means forgiving yourself, being okay, being yourself, and accepting who you are and knowing that you're doing the best at this point in time.
And what was the analogy on the plane?
The analogy on the plane is, as they say every time you fly, if the oxygen mask should fall down in front of you, make sure you fit your own before fitting the children. So the idea is that, you're able to breathe and thrive
Yeah.
and better able to help other people in the chairs next to you.
No good to anyone else until you're good to you first.
Yeah, no good. You've got to be good to you first. And I would actually throw in a little addition to that definition that you've very kindly given us, which is that I think being self-loving means it's okay to put yourself on an equal platform to others.
To see yourself as no better or worse.
Yeah, as no better and no worse. And I actually think, and I think this is what I've seen quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, which is why I'm a bit more sensitive to this, is I've seen lots of examples lately of people who have either not been able to accept a compliment and not been able to be assertive over, regarding their own needs or rights because perhaps they felt not worthy. If we've really dug deep, they felt not worthy. Or trying to position themselves as better than others, maybe again because they don't actually really feel worthy.
Yeah, so they overcompensate by putting up a shield or a barrier that says I'm actually fearful that I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And the way that I manage that is to put up an armour.
Yeah.
That says I'm better than everyone else, when in fact it comes from a fear of.
Yeah, and how ironic that people who are unable to assert their own needs as being equal to others, and those who assert their needs as being greater than others actually come from the same motivation point.
They do.
Isn't that interesting?
It's both fear. It's
Yeah,
fear.
it's fear. It's fear, and it's perhaps not feeling good enough somewhere along the line.
Yeah, Dr. Wayne Dyer, in one of his books, I can't remember which one, he boiled it all the way down to that love and fear were the polar opposites of each other.
Yeah.
So when you're in fear, you're not in a loving space for yourself or anyone else.
Yeah.
And when you have love, then you're accepting and available to yourself and everyone else.
Yeah.
And the clue is not feeling good.
Yeah.
So if you're ever not feeling good, it doesn't take long to attach that or find the foundation of that is fear.
Yeah.
And when you're feeling good, it doesn't take long to attach that or find the foundation of that is around love for yourself and others. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I guess, I've caught myself over the last few weeks where I've been in the company of people who perhaps haven't been, who haven't behaved as I might have expected them to behave. And I've caught myself thinking, wow, where does this behaviour come from? Because when I look at you as a human being, I think you're beautiful. And why don't you see that? Because when I see behaviour that perhaps might be not as I was expecting, then the first thing I catch myself thinking nowadays is, what's wrong? Like, what's upsetting you? What's driving this kind of uncomfortable behaviour?
Yeah.
And I feel kind of sad for
Yeah.
that person that they don't have that inner love, and it not having that manifests itself
Yeah.
as bad behaviour.
does.
So that could be being rude to others. It could be
Anger,
anger. It could be spiteful behaviour. It could be,
withdrawing as well.
withdrawing, silence. It could be surrender.
Yep.
Any of those things are usually, I think, a sign that this person doesn't have a healthy, positive regard for self at that point in time.
Yeah, they're living closer to fear than they are to love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think we ebb, or well, you've already said it actually, we ebb in and out of love for self?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're if you consider that we're a combination of everything that we've ever seen or heard or experienced, and we're also at the mercy of our DNA, our genetics, our chemical makeup,
Right.
then it makes us pretty complicated beings.
Yeah.
And to operate in the world, we find this this level of a livable level that we get through each day. But it ebbs and flows. You go into periods of fear and unhappiness and sadness and loss, and then you also then go into the other side where you have excitement and happiness and joy and bliss.
Yeah.
And it goes up and down and up and down. And the closest someone explained to me around bipolar at one point was that it was like this this pendulum swinging into all of this excitement and all of this euphoria and being able to take on the world and do anything, and then swinging all the way to the other end where you're useless, worthless, hopeless, no value.
Yeah.
And that cycle or that swing is exhausting
Yeah.
for them, whereas the rest of the world on the spectrum is heading towards more the centre,
Yeah, that's true.
but never totally centred,
yeah.
because you'll always ebb into fear and you'll ebb back into love and fear
Yeah.
and love. And it's just if you imagine the wave that I'm doing with my hand now, you want that to be not as extreme,
Yeah.
to be closer to the centre.
Yeah. And that comes back to something that I think we've already decided we're going to talk about next week, which is mindfulness and about being aware. And I certainly had an example of that this morning. I got up super, super, super duper early to go to a meeting, and then I got caught responding to and sending emails before I actually got into my car.
Yeah.
And found myself going to the meeting thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to be late. And went to mindfulness and going, well, right at this point in time, I'm actually not late. So I'm okay and I'm safe and I'm all right. But had to catch myself because I had very quickly gone to typical you, get up early and you still can't get there on time.
Yeah, all that negative talk started to come in. Yeah.
But I didn't stay in the negative, so I caught myself fairly quickly. So as you were gesturing with the waves up and down, which is great for a podcast, with the waves up and down, my wave was a ripple,
Yeah.
not a wave,
Yeah.
because I had that opportunity to go, hang on a second,
Yeah.
you've actually done a couple of other positive things this morning, may not have contributed to the point that you're in now, but even if you walk in late to this meeting, you're actually still a good human being. And I actually physically said that to myself this morning. You're a good human being.
That's it. And as we'll talk about in the podcast on mindfulness, it's about creating that gap between the thought and the feeling. So if you have the thought and then the feeling with mindfulness, and we'll talk about the next podcast, like I said, will help you find that gap. And you had that gap, right?
I had a gap.
Which allowed you to go, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hang on a second.
Yeah.
Walk in late, but no, you're still a good human being.
That's it.
And that's exactly where I went. And the ripple, it was a ripple, not a wave.
Yeah.
You're listening to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Connections. Do you want to spread the word in your workplace, community, team, or school? We're available to speak at your event or deliver customised training. Visit fortitudeatwork.com.au for more info.
So my question then is,
You're going to question me,
yeah,
Jimmy?
I thought why not?
Oh, okay.
What is happiness?
The first time you go to question me, you ask me such a big question.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
is happiness?
Yeah, because I'm guessing in the top few answers to anyone that is asked, what do you want out of life? What do you hope for out of life? Is I want to be happy. Is it a realistic expectation?
Well, actually, I think it is, provided that we understand that it's an emotion like any other emotion. So I don't think it's realistic to expect to live in a happy world all the time.
Okay.
I think it's realistic to expect to live in a loving world all the time, provided that that world is, or that love is self-love.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, the only thing we can control is how we think and feel about ourselves.
Okay.
We actually can't control how other people think and feel about us. We might influence that in the way that we behave. So if I behave in a way that is extreme with one of my friends, and then my friend decides they want to have nothing to do with me for that point in time because I'm a bit over the top, then I can control, I might be able to influence their decision around that if I calm my behaviour down a bit, and maybe they'll want to spend a bit more time with me.
But
Ultimately. But really all I ever can control is my own thinking
Yep.
and my own thoughts. So to
And
me...
and your own feelings.
And my own feelings.
Okay.
So to me, the only kind of love that I can ever truly hope to have ownership over
And depend on.
is the love I have for myself.
Yeah. Everything else is transient.
Yep, everything.
Yep. And if you're in a world with 7 billion people or more, the expectation that everyone else in the world is going to be there for you is unrealistic,
Yes,
because they have their own lives, their own journeys, their own paths, their own swings, mood swings, and that
Yes.
sort of stuff. So really, it's your own self-love is the only thing you can depend on,
yes.
and it's the one that will get most people through.
Yes. And I guess being able to put, it ties in with that whole notion of empathy, I think, in terms of being able to put yourself perhaps in the shoes of somebody else, or try and imagine what it might be like for somebody else. And a concrete example of this is where I will wear my black suit to a business event.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple of people at that business event that I would regularly go to an event with, for example. And then 2 weeks later, we have another business event. And it dawns on me that once again, I'm going to wear that black suit.
Yep.
And I think in my head, they might think, oh, gee, she hasn't washed her black suit, or
I'll be judged.
she doesn't have other clothes, and then I take a moment to go, hang on a second, the last time I saw them was 2 weeks ago. Do I remember what they were wearing? And in fact, I don't.
No.
I don't remember what they were wearing. So what makes me think that they would ever remember that 2 weeks ago I wore a black suit?
Okay. So it's imaginings.
Yeah.
So you have imaginings and fears around judgment.
And well, not even that. It's remembering that we are all too busy looking at ourselves as the star of our own show
Yep.
to be bothered looking at anybody else's show.
Okay. And then what if you wore the same clothes every day for 3 days without actually washing them and going to a meeting?
Well, and somebody somewhere, I think in the US, did that experiment, wore the same outfit, for 12 months or something. Nobody noticed.
Okay, but what if they did notice?
Well, I guess it depends on your motivation as to why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Really, it depends on, it depends on your purpose,
And
depends
then-
on your goal.
So if they noticed and they openly judged and they overtly judged and said, oh my God, you're wearing the same clothes 3 days in a row, what's wrong with you?
Well, yeah, if there was a physical presence like you're smelling,
Yeah. So how would you manage that one
Yeah.
with self-love?
well, yeah, as long as you're making the decision for yourself and you have your own reasons clear, then it really doesn't matter.
What they think or
Yeah, it doesn't matter what they think. However, that doesn't negate a sense of connection in the world. So because I have a level of self-love for myself, that doesn't mean I don't care about other people around me.
Okay.
So it doesn't give me a license to be rude, to bully people, to be offensive, because I love myself regardless, and if they don't like me, they can suck it.
Okay.
It's about, I think, the type of people I want to be around are the people who have a healthy love for themselves combined with a healthy love and positive regard for others.
Yeah.
It's not a license to shoot your mouth off and not care what other people think, because that might be offensive to others. It's about knowing that I can speak with confidence because I believe in myself, but I'm still respectful of where others are coming from, because not everyone's at the same level of thinking.
Okay. So, and I think what I was actually heading towards was, if you are judged, and you are, and not about reacting in a angry way,
Yeah,
but you actually feel hurt
yeah.
that people are judging you, because that's where the challenges are with self-love.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So the challenge is, if your thoughts come in, oh my God, they're judging me. Oh my God, they're thinking this about
Yeah.
me. And you go into that self-talk. Oh, I'm not good enough. I've done the wrong thing. I'm bad. I'm no
letting
good.
people down.
Letting down. I'm no good.
Yeah.
How does someone bring self-love into that?
That's a question I was going to ask you.
Oh, okay.
How do we actually foster self-love? Because I think it's a skill, to be honest, and I think it's it's something that we practice, that we have to practice and consciously practice every day, and we have to adopt habits that are self-loving habits.
Okay. And every time you are challenged is an opportunity.
Yeah.
And if you sort of go off into a bit of philosophical world here, I feel we tend to attract those opportunities. So if you have a part of you with your self-estimation, your self-esteem, where you are challenged about what other people think, and are they judging you, and people are going to be letting people down, then you'll keep attracting these opportunities over and over again for you to practice your self-love, so that when that does happen, you go, hang on a second, with your mindfulness.
Yeah.
I am good enough. I am doing my best in this moment. I am a compassionate person. I'm a reasonable person. I'm not murdering anyone. I'm good enough,
Yeah.
right? And you start those that sort of head talk. You replace the head talk
Yeah.
with I'm not good enough to I am good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And wasn't it, I think is it Angela Mao who said that I'm sorry, I know I've got the pronunciation incorrect. There's somebody somewhere along the line will correct me, top of my head. But she basically said the situation will never go away until the lesson is learnt.
There you go. So it'll come around in circles.
Yeah.
Yep.
It will come around in circles. And in fact, what's even more interesting when we get meta and stand back and look at what's going on and the choices we make, as you and I have said so many times, haven't we? It's so interesting how we will put ourselves or create those situations,
Yep.
even at a subconscious level.
Yep.
We create those situations where then we have to face the things that we probably fear the most.
That's it. Yeah. We attract our greatest fears.
Yeah, we attract our greatest fears
And then
so that we might,
have an opportunity
yeah,
to practice self-love.
yeah, to practice self-love.
Because as we said at the beginning of this podcast, it seems to me, and from experience, my own personal experience, and from witnessing others, the way people find their way through the pain and into a livable level of a peaceful existence and a purposeful life is the end result is always around unconditional love for self and others.
Yes,
And to practice that.
yes,
That's the solution to the problem.
yes,
And every time you attract something that gives you fear, to be mindful around that and say, rather than this is a bad situation, it's actually an opportunity for me to practice self-love.
Yes.
And how am I going to do that?
Yes.
And then when you find the resources within and you use certain tactics and head talk,
Yes.
and you practice it each time, you get better at it.
Yes. Great points. And can I build on that and say that, I guess in summary around those points you're raising, Johnny, is that what is typically the most helpful when you're in a stressful situation or a situation of conflict or something that's going to cause or that is causing you anxiety, be it at work or at home.
And often you can feel it in your body.
You might feel it in your body, you might
Stomach,
tense up,
your chest, your shoulders.
you might feel sick.
Yep.
So any of those things that are causing you anxiety, a great way to address that situation, the best first step that you can make is ask yourself, what is the best self-loving decision I could make for myself right now?
That's it.
Because it comes back to the aeroplane analogy. In a time of conflict, even if you're in conflict with other people and, you know, the chaos around you, which is what I had,
Yep.
even if you're in that situation, if the very first thing you say is, what is the most self-loving thing I could do for me right now?
Yep.
If you're able to do that, then suddenly, and you do that, then you're able to put the mask on somebody else.
Absolutely.
But you can't put the mask on somebody else or resolve a situation if you don't first love yourself in that situation.
So it's a selfless love of self.
Yeah, a selfless love of self.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so let's go back to, how do you practice self-love? What are the things that I could be doing every day? Because if I've come from a family, for example, if I've come from an environmental background where you don't have tickets on yourself and you never accept a compliment, I think I used an example. I don't think it's survived in any other podcast episodes. Joey will probably prove me right or wrong along there. But I used a cookie.
You're assuming that she listens to the podcast.
She's laughing right now, going, "Oh, what?" I use an example around cooking. I lived in a family where my mum spent a lot of time cooking, put food on the table, and every time there would be something not quite right with that meal. And I find myself, I do exactly the same thing now. I might spend forever, all day cooking, serve it up, be the best meal in the planet.
Someone will say, "This is amazing, Leanne," and you will go,
"Oh, I burnt the sauce a bit."
"Yeah, that's not quite right. Like that could have been done better. That's a bit undercooked. That's a bit overcooked."
Yeah.
You'll sit there and go into this huge criticism of why it's just not good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's the model that I have around food on the table. That's the model that I have. So if you've grown up in a family where it's not, where self-love, making a self-loving decision is not the norm, how do you foster that then as an adult, listening to this podcast?
Maybe affirmations and compliments. So something to practice is that whenever anyone says anything good about you, to be mindful.
Yeah.
When it happens, watch yourself not accepting it, and then say thank you.
Ah, yes. We'll try it on, hey?
Just say thank you. Yeah. Don't shake your head. Don't say don't be silly. Don't say no, of course not, or they're better, or it wasn't good enough. No, notice all that.
Just say thank you.
Just say thank you. Yeah.
Great. Excellent.
Also self-affirmations, and I call them I am statements. So if you have come from an environment in your family where self-love wasn't part of that fostering, and you spent your early life was spent in a lot of criticism, the people that were meant to love you unconditionally, no matter what, spent a lot of time judging you and criticising you, and having a go at you.
Yep.
So as a 6-year-old, you came home with that picture. It didn't go in the fridge. It went in the garbage.
Yep.
Or if it did go in the fridge, it said, "Yeah, you could do better, but we'll stick it up there."
Yeah.
Everyone will have that different level of
Yeah.
experience around criticism.
Yes.
So if that's part of who you are now as an adult, where you don't accept compliments,
Yes.
and you also don't believe you deserve compliments,
Yeah.
then you can put into practice I am statements. And that is, go and grab all the little conflicts that you hear in your head all the time and swap them out each time. So when you hear yourself say, I'm running late, I'm no good, you go, actually, I am good enough. I am on time most of the time.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And you know, the beauty of that advice is that you can do it in your head and nobody knows.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Because, you know, it takes a hurdle to change habits,
Yep.
you know, to change old ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And you can practice that in your head with nobody knowing.
Yeah. And you can put in, I am funny.
Yep.
I am attractive.
Yep.
And when you hear yourself saying, I am fat, or I am short,
Yeah.
or I am stupid, or I am crazy, all those little I am statements.
Yep.
You know, as we said in another podcast, every time you say that in your head, you're giving it energy, which means it's going to grow.
Yep.
So you go, oh, there it is. I'm going to swap that out to, I'm actually good looking enough. There's people shorter than me. There's people taller than me. There's people smarter than me. There's people less smart than I am. I am smart enough.
Yeah.
I am good looking enough.
Yeah, good.
I am tall enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So grab it, notice it, swap it in, practice.
Great. Can I throw in a couple of
Oh, yeah,
pointers
absolutely.
along the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I tell you a little story first?
Yeah, people love stories,
I know.
as long as they're interesting.
Okay. So when I was a teenager,
Oh, this is interesting.
hanging out, yeah. When I was a teenager, hanging out with my bestie, my girlfriend, there was a couple of boys that we really liked, and we thought, you know, let's head off and try and score a couple of dates
Yep.
with these boys. And I got it into my head that we should send them some roses and then an invitation out on a date. And my friend said to me, oh my goodness, I couldn't possibly do that because, you know, that would just be the most embarrassing thing in the world. I just couldn't do it. And I said to her at the time, what does it matter? In the overall scheme of things, long term, nobody's going to remember and nobody's going to care. So, you know, when I'm dead and gone and I've got a tombstone in the grave, it's not going to have on it, here lies Leanne Faulkner. When she was 17, she sent roses to a boy.
So it took the fear out of it.
Yeah, nobody's going to know. It's completely insignificant. So we sent the roses off to the boys and we never got a date. So it was actually quite embarrassing at the time, I have to say. However, my point is,
Crazy boys.
thanks, honey, you have to say that. It's in the marriage contract.
I know.
My point is, things that we often worry and stress about in the short term often become quite insignificant over time. And so I find with the wisdom of age nowadays, if I'm in a situation that I find I'm feeling uncomfortable or I'm feeling conflicted, I'll often say to myself, if I were able to act or behave in a way to resolve this situation where I knew there was absolutely no judgment by anybody, there was no negative consequence that would happen to anybody, myself or anybody else, and it would feel quite liberating to do, what action would that be that answered those three desires? So there's no judgment, no consequence to harm anybody else, and was liberating. What would that behaviour look like?
If I had no fear.
If I have no fear, what would I do?
Yep.
How would I behave if I had no fear? I take a moment to think, gee, if I had no fear, I'd probably say this, I'd do this, I'd do that.
Yep.
I go to that level of imagining myself running my own little movie, and then I go, you know what? I'm going to give that a try. Because it's a bit like giving a boy roses when I was 17. Nowadays, nobody cares.
No.
So I'm going to try on that behaviour
Take a
and
risk.
see and take a risk.
Yep.
I'm going to have a go. And I think going to that place and making that decision is often quite a self-loving decision, because what it does, it puts my needs at the same level as the other person's needs.
Yep.
and negates the seriousness of the situation because I remember the roses.
Yeah, there you go. So if you, and I was adding this earlier with the I am statements.
Yep.
It says, I am valuable. I am important.
Yes,
I have a voice.
yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Add that in. The other thing I do to try and practice self-love is I'll often mimic others
Okay.
that I believe are that have self-loving habits.
Oh, you spot them
Yep, spot them.
and you watch them and you
Yep.
say, yeah, I'd like to be more like that.
Yes, I'd like to be more like that. I remember when I was starting out as a corporate trainer, when I was learning my craft, somebody said to me at the time, another name for trainer is thief. What we do is we spend our life collecting stories
Yeah.
that have gone on for ourselves or others so that we can recount those stories to other people and help them learn and move along in life. And that's been a habit that I've kind of kept with me forever. So what I've done now is I try and take notice of the people that I admire that seem to me to have a good, healthy level of love for themselves.
Yeah.
And I'll think,
I'll mimic that.
yep, I'll mimic that.
Yeah.
Or if I'm in an uncomfortable situation that I'm struggling with, I try and imagine what would Mary Jo do
Yep.
if she were me right now,
Yep.
because I know she's got self-loving habits.
Yep.
So if Mary Jo were here, what would she do? And I try and imagine what Mary Jo would do, and then I go and choose to do the same.
Yeah. That's an excellent. And people with spirituality or even a religious belief
Yeah.
have sections of their scriptures that talk about unconditional love, and in particular Jesus.
Yeah.
And we'll often say, what would Jesus do?
Hmm.
What would Jesus say? And because Jesus, in his latter years, was unconditionally loving of all.
Yeah.
And he was the model of that.
Yeah. Or Buddha.
Or Buddha, absolutely. So
Any sort of religious icon.
that's it. So with personal self-caring and self-loving values,
Yeah.
in a situation where you're being challenged, you say to yourself, what would a self-loving person like Sally, like
That's
Jesus,
right. Like Buddha.
what would they do? They would allow, they would surrender, they would be okay with
Yeah.
what's happening, and they would see the opportunity in it,
Yeah.
and they would see the gifts in it, and they would love themselves through it
Yeah.
and trust it.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And do you think if you love yourself that you're up yourself?
Well, as you said earlier, when you're giving examples about those that with anger or with being nasty, we worked out that anyone who is in an extreme behaviour of self-loathing or overly narcissistic
Yeah.
self-importance
Yeah.
that come from the same place.
Yeah.
So anyone who's spending a lot of time trying to big note themselves, they're actually that's exhausting.
I think people can see through that though, right? People can see that that's not self-love.
Yeah, that's
You know,
right.
we all have our authenticity radar, don't we?
Yeah.
We really all do.
Yeah. So if you see that for what it is,
Yeah.
and if you notice that in yourself
Yeah.
when it happens, then you can start heading towards more centre,
Yeah.
more centered.
Great. So genuine love for self
Yeah.
is not about egotistical behaviours. It would be none of that. It would just be I'm actually confident enough to assert my position
Yeah.
and care for yours as well
That's it.
at the same time.
Because I see you as an equal.
And equal to
You're
me.
equally important to me.
Yeah.
And I am important.
Yeah.
And you're important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not ego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How beautiful, Johnny.
It's very cool.
I've really enjoyed this episode.
Oh, good. Me too.
I've absolutely loved it.
Excellent. I actually, just before we go, I've actually got a tattoo with Corinthians, and it sounds like I'm a religious person. I'm not. I just really love love is,
Yes.
Corinthians 13, 1-13, which
Yes.
is love is patient, love is kind, love is
Yes.
not selfish, it's giving,
Yes.
full of hope, and that is a great
Reminder.
reminder to me to be unconditionally loving of myself and all others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's a lovely tattoo. I see it regularly.
Yes, it's on my bum. No, it's not. It's on my shoulder. It's on my shoulder. Okay.
I love you, Johnny.
You too.
Bye all.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Connections with Leanne and John. Connect with us via Facebook at Fortitude at Work. We'd love to hear your